The sound of Tessa whispering, "I can't wait to feel you inside me again," at 2 in the morning wasn't exactly what I expected to hear while fixing our jammed bedroom window. But there I was, screwdriver in hand, listening to my wife of 8 years promise someone who definitely wasn't me that she'd do that thing with her tongue next time they met. I'm Ethan Miller, and apparently I'm the kind of guy whose wife schedules her dirty talk sessions while I'm doing unpaid home maintenance. Lucky me. The rain hammered against our Victorian house like bullets, each drop echoing the thoughts pounding in my skull. Tessa sat cross-legged on our bed, phone pressed to her ear, completely oblivious to my presence. Her designer pajamas, the ones I'd bought her for Christmas, caught the lamplight as she giggled like a teenager. She hasn't called me babe in months, I thought, watching her twirl her blonde hair around her finger. Guess I'm just the live-in handyman now. Our house used to be beautiful. Hell, I'd spent 3 years restoring every inch of it myself, sanding floors, rewiring electrical, rebuilding the wraparound porch. Now it felt like a mausoleum. All chipped paint and drafty windows that I couldn't seem to fix no matter how many times I tried. "Tomorrow night at the Riverside Inn," Tessa whispered into the phone. "Room 237. Wear that cologne I bought you." My hand tightened around the screwdriver. She'd been working late at her design studio for months, coming home smelling like unfamiliar aftershave and making excuses about difficult clients. New perfume appeared in our bathroom. Designer clothes I'd never seen before filled her closet. When I asked about it, she'd snap about me being paranoid and controlling. "I should go," she said softly. "He might hear us." Right there in our bedroom, I'd become he. Not Ethan, not her husband, just some inconvenient obstacle to her phone sex sessions. I finished tightening the window latch and packed up my tools, moving quietly through our house that suddenly felt foreign. In the kitchen, I found a wine glass with lipstick that wasn't Tessa's shade. In the living room, her laptop sat open on the coffee table, screen glowing. My finger hovered over the touchpad. Snooping through your wife's computer is the kind of thing that makes you officially pathetic, right? But hearing her plan hotel hookups while you fix the house she's slowly destroying seemed pretty pathetic, too. I clicked. Her email opened immediately. No password, no security, like she wanted me to find it. The most recent thread made my stomach drop through the floor. "Jace, can't wait for tonight. Ethan's fixing the upstairs window, completely clueless as usual. You're going to wreck me so good I won't be able to walk straight tomorrow. P.S. Loved how you grabbed my ass at the bar last week, right in front of everyone. So hot knowing they all saw and he didn't notice." Jace Morrison. I knew exactly who that was. The cocky ex-con who owned Morrison's Auto Repair on Elm Street, leather jacket, tribal tattoos, the kind of guy who called women baby, and thought revving his muscle car impressed people. Apparently it impressed my wife. I scrolled through weeks of messages, explicit photos, detailed descriptions of what they'd done in his garage after hours, crude jokes about me. "Maybe if your husband actually satisfied you, you wouldn't need a real man." Her response, "Can't wait to see you wreck him again tonight." Again. This had been going on for months. My hands shook as I screenshotted everything. The rain outside matched the storm building in my chest. Not just anger, but something darker. Something that tasted like revenge. I grabbed my jacket and car keys. If Tessa wanted to play games, I'd show her how creative a clueless handyman could be. Morrison's Auto sat on the edge of downtown, all neon signs and oil stains. Jace's cherry red Camaro gleamed under the streetlights like a beacon of arrogance. The same car I'd seen parked outside Lou's dive bar when Tessa claimed she was working late with clients. I pulled out my house key, the one I'd cut myself when we first moved in, and dragged it along the driver's side door. The metal screamed against paint, spelling out cheater in jagged letters. For good measure, I keyed homewrecker on the hood and left a used condom from our bathroom trash on his windshield. Childish? Absolutely. Satisfying? You bet. I was snapping photos of my handiwork when headlights flooded the parking lot. Jace's truck rumbled to a stop, and he climbed out with Tessa giggling beside him. She wore the black dress I'd complimented at dinner last week, the one she'd claimed was just for staying home. "What the hell?" Jace's voice boomed across the lot as he spotted his vandalized car. I ducked behind a dumpster, but not fast enough. His eyes found mine in the reflection of his car window. "You." He grabbed a wrench from his truck bed. "You're dead, Miller." I ran. Lou's dive bar smelled like stale beer and broken dreams, perfect for my current situation. I burst through the door, soaked and breathless, while Jace's footsteps echoed somewhere in the alley behind me. If this were a movie, I'd have backup, I thought, sliding onto a bar stool. Instead, I've got Lou and a bowl of stale peanuts. Lou Brennan had owned this place for 20 years, serving whiskey to guys like me who'd made spectacular messes of their lives. He was the closest thing I had to a friend in this town, mainly because he'd seen enough human wreckage to be judgmental about anyone. "You look like hell," Lou said, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden bar. "Let me guess, Tessa?" "Worse, Tessa and Jace Morrison." Lou winced. "The auto guy?" "Damn, Ethan, that's rough." The bar's regulars, a collection of divorced contractors and lonely retirees, glanced over with the kind of morbid curiosity reserved for car accidents. In a town this size, everyone knew everyone else's business. By morning, half of them would know my wife was screwing the local grease monkey. "She's been planning hotel meetings while I fix our house," I said, taking a long pull from my beer, sexting him details about what they're going to do. Laughing about how clueless I am. "What are you going to do?" I stared at my reflection in the mirror behind the bar. 42 years old, graying hair, calloused hands from a lifetime of honest work. I'd built a business from nothing, restored our house with my own sweat, treated Tessa like a queen. And this was what I got. "Let us ask, if they want war," I said quietly. "I'll bring napalm." My phone buzzed with a text from Tessa. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." I opened Facebook and updated my relationship status to single, tagging Tessa and her entire family. Then I posted, "When your wife schedules hotel hookups while you're fixing the house she's destroying." Some people have no class. My phone exploded with notifications, comments, messages, calls. I blocked Tessa's number and watched the chaos unfold from the safety of Lou's bar. 20 minutes later, she stormed through the door like a hurricane in heels. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed, her perfect makeup smeared with tears. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." The bar went silent. Every patron turned to watch the show. "I humiliated you?" I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Sweetheart, you've been humiliating yourself for months. I just made it public." Jace appeared behind her, his wrench still in hand. "You keyed my car, you psycho." "Prove it." I stood up, surprised by how calm I felt. "Oh wait, you can't. Because you were too busy screwing my wife to notice who did it." He lunged forward, but I was ready. I threw my beer in his face and slapped him hard enough to echo through the bar. The sound was beautiful. "You want to hit me with that wrench?" I asked as beer dripped from his shocked face. "Go ahead. Do it in front of all these witnesses. See how that works out for your parole officer." Lou reached for his phone. "I'm calling the cops." "Don't bother," I said, heading for the back exit. "I was never here." I left them standing there, Tessa sobbing, Jace dripping and humiliated, half the town watching their shame play out in real time. It was a good start, but I was just getting warmed up. The next morning brought consequences. My phone rang non-stop with canceled contracts. Tessa's mother, Patricia, had called every client I'd ever worked for, spinning stories about my violent outburst and mental instability. 3 jobs disappeared before lunch. I sat in my empty house, listening to the silence where Tessa's voice used to be. She'd moved in with her friend Maggie Chen, her college roommate who'd always looked at me like something stuck to her shoe. Maggie owned half the rental properties in town and had connections everywhere that mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is just the beginning. Leave town or it gets worse. A friend. A friend. Right." I drove to Tessa's design studio, a trendy space in the renovated Mill District that I'd helped her set up 3 years ago. Through the window, I could see her showing fabric samples to Mrs. Henderson, the mayor's wife. Both women looked up as I parked, their expressions shifting to disgust. Time for phase 2. I'd kept copies of everything, Tessa's fake design credentials, her inflated client testimonials, the photos she'd stolen from other designers' portfolios. Building her business had required some creative storytelling, and I'd helped her craft every lie. Now those lies would destroy her. I sent anonymous emails to every client, complete with documentation, screenshots of her admitting to plagiarism, evidence of overcharging, photos of work she'd claimed as her own but had actually been done by designers in Boston. By afternoon, her studio was empty. By evening, the bank had called about her business loan. By the next morning, she was ruined. But I wasn't done with Jace. The Riverside County Fair was Jace Morrison's favorite place to show off. Every year, he entered his precious Camaro in the amateur racing competition, revving his engine and flexing for the local girls who still found bad boys attractive. This year's race was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, with half the town planning to attend. I spent Friday night in his garage. Breaking in was easier than I'd expected. The side door lock was older than my marriage and twice as broken. Jace's Camaro sat in the center of the space like a shrine to his ego, freshly repaired from my keying incident and polished to mirror brightness. Sugar in the gas tank was amateur hour. Instead, I loosened his brake lines just enough to make the car pull hard to the right at high speeds, Nothing dangerous, just embarrassing. Then I spray-painted Homewrecker across both doors in bright pink letters, added Tessa's toy on the hood, and superglued condoms to his windshield wipers. The piece de resistance was the note I left on his driver's seat. Real men don't steal other men's wives. Enjoy the race. Your biggest fan. Saturday afternoon brought perfect weather and a crowd hungry for entertainment. I bought a hot dog and found a spot near the starting line, watching Jace's face turn purple as he discovered my artwork. He tried scraping off the paint, but spray paint on car finish requires professional removal. The condoms wouldn't budge either. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed over the fairground speakers. Our racers are taking their positions. Jace climbed into his vandalized car, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The crowd pointed and laughed. Someone had already posted photos on social media with captions like, "Guess we know what Jace does in his spare time." The race started, and for the first quarter mile, everything looked normal. Then Jace hit the first turn. His car pulled hard right, tires screaming as he fought the wheel. Instead of the smooth racing line he'd planned, the Camaro lurched toward the hay bales lining the track. He overcorrected, fishtailing dramatically before spinning completely around and stalling in the middle of the course. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Someone started a slow clap. Kids pointed and giggled. Jace sat in his dead car, surrounded by pink graffiti and dangling condoms, while the other racers drove carefully around him. It was beautiful, but my real masterpiece was still coming. That evening, I received a visit from Maggie Chen. She knocked on my door at sunset, dressed in her usual black business attire and carrying a manila envelope like a weapon. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into my living room. Maggie was everything Tessa aspired to be: successful, connected, ruthless. She owned Chen Properties, the biggest rental company in 3 counties, and had her perfectly manicured fingers in every business deal that mattered. She was also the kind of woman who smiled while she destroyed you. "Tessa's staying with me until she gets back on her feet," Maggie said, settling onto my couch like she owned it, "which might take a while, considering what you've done to her business." "What I've done?" I just shared some truth with her clients. "You destroyed her life out of spite." I laughed. She destroyed her own life when she decided to screw Jace Morrison. I just documented the process. Maggie opened her envelope and spread photos across my coffee table. Pictures of me keying Jace's car, breaking into his garage, spray painting his Camaro. Someone had been watching me, following my every move. "Vandalism, breaking and entering, stalking," she said calmly. "I have witnesses who'll testify that you've been threatening both of them. One phone call to the police, and you'll be the one whose life is ruined." "What do you want?" $50,000. Cash. And a signed agreement that you'll leave town permanently. I stared at the photos, my mind racing. "You've been planning this." "I've been protecting my friend from her abusive husband." "Abusive?" "I never laid a hand on her." "Emotional abuse is still abuse, Ethan, and you've provided plenty of evidence." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "You have 48 hours to get the money." After that, I call the police and the media. Imagine how that story will play. Violent husband terrorizes cheating wife and her lover. You'll be lucky if you can find work cleaning toilets. After she left, I sat alone with her photos and ultimatum, feeling the walls close in around me. Maggie had outplayed me completely, turning my revenge into evidence of my own crimes. She was smart, connected, and absolutely ruthless. But she'd made one mistake. She'd assumed I was the same broken man who'd been fixing windows while his wife planned hotel hookups. She thought I was still playing defense, still trying to save something worth saving. She was wrong. I wasn't trying to save my marriage anymore. I wasn't trying to win Tessa back or prove my innocence or take the high road. I was done being the good guy, done being the victim, done playing by rules that only applied to people like me. If Maggie wanted to see a villain, I'd show her what a real villain looked like. But first, I needed to understand exactly who I was dealing with. The Riverside Public Library kept old newspaper archives on microfiche, a technology as outdated as my marriage, but perfect for digging up buried secrets. I spent Sunday mornings scrolling through 10 years of local news, searching for any mention of Maggie Chen. What I found was interesting. Maggie had arrived in town 12 years ago with enough cash to buy her first rental property outright. No credit history, no local connections, just a mysterious woman with money and ambition. The newspaper had done a puff piece about her entrepreneurial success, but the details were vague. More interesting was what I found in the police blotter from 8 years ago. A noise complaint at 47 Maple Street, Maggie's address, filed by neighbors who reported loud arguing and breaking glass. The responding officer noted, "No charges filed, matter resolved privately." The complainant's name was familiar. Patricia Hoffman, Tessa's mother. I drove to Patricia's house, a tidy colonial in the suburbs where Tessa had grown up. Patricia answered the door in her gardening clothes, her expression souring when she saw me. "I have nothing to say to you," she said, starting to close the door. "I want to know about Maggie Chen." She paused. "What about her?" "The noise complaint you filed 8 years ago. What was that about?" Patricia's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." 47 Maple Street, loud arguing, breaking glass. "You called the police on Maggie. Why?" She looked around nervously, then pulled me inside. "You can't tell anyone we talked." "About what?" "Maggie. She's not what she seems. That first year she was here, she threw these parties. Loud, wild parties with people from out of town, men in expensive cars, women who looked like, well, not the kind of women you'd expect in a place like this." "What kind of parties?" "The kind where money changes hands for things that aren't legal." Patricia wrung her hands. I never said anything because she cleaned up her act, became respectable. But I always wondered where her money really came from. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she's got her claws in my daughter now. Tessa's staying with her, and I'm worried. Maggie's the kind of woman who collects people's secrets and uses them as weapons." I left Patricia's house with a new understanding of my enemy. Maggie wasn't just Tessa's friend. She was a predator who'd built her empire on other people's weaknesses. She collected secrets, manipulated situations, and destroyed anyone who threatened her carefully constructed world. But everyone had secrets. Even Maggie Chen. I spent the next 2 days following her, learning her routines, watching her interactions. She met with city council members in expensive restaurants, had private conversations with the police chief's wife, and made regular trips to a storage facility on the outskirts of town. The storage facility was the key. Unit 47 was registered to M. Chen Enterprises, paid for annually in cash. The lock was new, expensive, and completely beyond my lock-picking skills. But the unit next door was empty, and the wall between them was just thin plywood. I rented Unit 46 under a fake name and spent Tuesday night with a reciprocating saw, cutting a hole just large enough to crawl through. What I found inside Unit 47 changed everything. Boxes of photographs showing local politicians in compromising positions, financial records documenting bribes and kickbacks, audio recordings of private conversations, hard drives full of digital evidence. Maggie Chen wasn't just a successful businesswoman. She was a blackmailer who'd built her empire by destroying anyone who crossed her. And buried in the deepest box, I found my own file. Photos of me from 8 years ago, drunk at a Christmas party, my arm around a woman who wasn't my wife. Nothing had happened. I'd been too drunk to do anything but pose for pictures. But the images looked incriminating. There were also financial records showing the cash payments I'd made to help Tessa start her business, doctored to look like money laundering. Maggie had been collecting ammunition against me for years, waiting for the right moment to use it. But she'd made a fatal mistake. In her arrogance, she'd documented everything, every scheme, every victim, every crime. Her insurance policy had become her confession. I spent the rest of the night copying files, photographing documents, and downloading digital evidence. By dawn, I had enough material to destroy not just Maggie, but half the corrupt officials in 3 counties. The abandoned amusement park outside town had been closed for 15 years, its rides rusting in the weather and its buildings slowly collapsing. It was the perfect place for a final confrontation. Isolated, atmospheric, and equipped with a sound system that still worked if you knew which breakers to flip. I sent identical messages to Tessa, Jace, and Maggie. "Meet me at Funland at midnight. Come alone. Time to end this." They arrived together, of course. Maggie was too smart to let her pawns face me alone, and they were too scared to refuse her orders. I watched from the shadows as their car pulled into the empty parking lot, headlights cutting through the fog that rolled off the nearby river. "This is stupid," Jace muttered as they climbed out. "We should have called the cops." "And tell them what?" Maggie snapped. "That we're being blackmailed by a man we've been systematically destroying? Let's just get this over with." I stepped out of the darkness, my hands empty and visible. "Thanks for coming." "What do you want?" Tessa demanded. She looked terrible, thin, pale, her designer clothes wrinkled. Guilt and stress had aged her 5 years in 2 weeks. "I want the truth," I said. "All of it." On camera, I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Tell everyone watching how this really started. Tell them about Maggie's storage unit and her collection of blackmail material. Tell them how she's been pulling strings in this town for years." Maggie stepped forward, her composure cracking for the first time. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Unit 47 at Riverside Storage. Want me to describe what's inside?" Her face went white. "You broke into my property. Just like you broke into my life. Turnabout's fair play. I'd rigged speakers throughout the park's midway, connected to a wireless system I could control from my phone. With a tap of the screen, Maggie's own voice echoed from every corner of the abandoned park. Recordings I'd found in her files, conversations where she'd planned the destruction of local business owners who'd refused to pay her protection money. "Stop it!" she screamed, lunging for my phone. I sidestepped easily, letting her stumble into a pile of old foam blocks from the defunct kids' area. She came up covered in mold and debris, her perfect composure finally shattered. "Your turn, Jace," I said, still recording. "Tell everyone how Maggie promised you a cut of my money if you helped destroy my marriage. Tell them how seducing my wife was just business to you." "That's not—" he started, then stopped as his own voice filled the air. Another recording from Maggie's collection, this one of him bragging to his mechanic buddy about the easy money he'd make by sleeping with that designer chick. Tessa stared at him in horror. "You said you loved me." "I do love you, baby. The money was just—" "Just what? A bonus for screwing me?" The three of them turned on each other like animals, years of lies and manipulation finally exploding into the open. I kept recording as they screamed accusations, revealed secrets, and destroyed the last pretense of their alliance. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called in reports of screaming from the abandoned park. But I wasn't worried. Lou Brennan would testify that I'd been in his bar all evening, playing pool and drinking beer. My alibi was airtight. "One more thing," I said, as red and blue lights flashed through the trees. "Maggie, you might want to check your storage unit. I'm sure the FBI will find it very interesting." Her face went gray. "You didn't—" Anonymous tip about a suspected money laundering operation. They should be cutting the lock right about now. The police cars pulled into the parking lot, officers climbing out with flashlights and confused expressions. They found 4 people in an abandoned amusement park. 3 of them covered in dirt and screaming at each other, one of them calmly putting away his phone. "Evening, officers," I said, just having a conversation with my ex-wife and her friends. "We're all done here." The Riverside County Fair returned the following weekend, and with it came the annual charity auction on the main stage. Half the town turned out for the event, including the 3 people who'd tried to destroy me. I'd spent the week watching their world collapse in real time. The FBI raid on Maggie's storage unit had uncovered enough evidence to bring down a dozen corrupt officials. Her real estate empire crumbled overnight as federal investigators froze her assets and arrested her business partners. Jace lost his auto shop when his parole officer learned about his involvement in blackmail schemes. He was back in county lockup, awaiting trial on extortion charges. Tessa moved back in with her mother, broke and unemployed, her reputation in ruins. The design studio was gone, the house was in foreclosure, and her social circle had evaporated like morning mist. But I wasn't done with them yet. The charity auction was in full swing when I climbed onto the stage and took the microphone from the startled announcer. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying across the fairground, "I have a story to tell you." The crowd quieted, sensing drama. In the front row, I spotted Tessa, Jace, and Maggie sitting together like refugees from their own disaster. 8 months ago, I was a happily married man who thought he knew his wife. I fixed our house, built her business, and trusted her completely. What I didn't know was that she was planning hotel hookups with Jace Morrison while I worked on our bedroom window. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Phones came out, recording everything. What I also didn't know was that Maggie Chen had been collecting blackmail material on half this town for years, using people's secrets to build her criminal empire. She orchestrated my wife's affair as part of an elaborate scheme to steal my property and drive me out of town. Maggie tried to stand up, but the crowd around her had grown hostile. Someone shouted, "Sit down," and she collapsed back into her chair. "But here's the thing about small-town corruption," I continued. "It only works when people stay quiet. When decent folks are too polite to call out the criminals hiding behind respectable facades." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system. So let me share some highlights from Maggie's private collection. For the next 10 minutes, I played recordings that exposed years of bribery, extortion, and fraud. City council members taking kickbacks, police officers accepting bribes, business owners paying protection money. The crowd listened in stunned silence as their town's dirty secrets spilled out like poison from a broken bottle. And just to be clear about my own situation, I said, "Here's Jace Morrison explaining to his buddy how much money he expected to make by seducing my wife." Jace's recorded voice filled the fairground. "Maggie promised me 20 grand if I could get the wife to leave him. Easy money for easy work, you know? The chick's desperate for attention, and the husband's a total loser." Tessa's face crumpled as hundreds of people heard exactly what she'd meant to her lover. The crowd began to boo, their sympathy for the other woman evaporating in the face of such calculated betrayal. "Now," I said, pulling out a set of car keys. "Who wants to see some justice?" I walked to the edge of the stage and hurled Jace's keys into the dunk tank, where the high school principal was raising money for new textbooks. Step right up, dunk the principal, and help send a message about what we do to homewreckers in this town. The line for the dunk tank stretched across the midway within minutes. Kids, parents, grandparents. Everyone wanted a chance to throw baseballs and send a message. The principal, a good sport who understood the symbolism, hammed it up as he got dunked over and over again. Meanwhile, Jace sat in the crowd, watching his car keys sink to the bottom of a carnival game while hundreds of people cheered his humiliation. But wait, I announced, there's more. I pulled out the deed to our house, the house I'd restored with my own hands, the house Tessa had tried to steal through forged documents. I'm donating this property to the County Historical Society, effective immediately. The crowd erupted in applause. I'd just given away a $250,000 house to spite my ex-wife, and they loved me for it. Tessa finally found her voice. Ethan, please. That's our home. Our home. I laughed into the microphone. Sweetheart, you gave up any claim to our anything when you started screwing Jace in his garage. The house belongs to the people now. Maybe they'll turn it into a museum about the dangers of adultery. The crowd roared with laughter and approval. Someone started chanting, Justice, Justice, and others picked it up. I looked out at the sea of faces, neighbors, clients, people I'd known for years, and saw something I hadn't expected. Respect. They weren't looking at me like a victim anymore, or even like a villain. They were looking at me like someone who'd fought back against corruption and won. In conclusion, I said, raising my voice over the cheering crowd, let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can destroy an honest man's life for profit. We might be small-town people, but we're not stupid, and we're not helpless. Cross us at your own risk. I dropped the microphone and walked off the stage to thunderous applause. Behind me, Tessa was sobbing, Jace was staring at his shoes, and Maggie was trying to disappear into the crowd, but I wasn't looking back anymore. I walked through the fairground with my head high, accepting congratulations and handshakes from people who'd written me off just weeks before. My phone buzzed with job offers, friend requests, and messages of support. At the edge of the parking lot, I paused and looked back at the chaos I'd created. 3 people who'd tried to destroy me now sat in ruins, their schemes exposed, their reputations shattered, their futures uncertain. It was perfect. I climbed into my truck and drove away from the fair, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life and the people who'd tried to bury me. The road ahead was empty and full of possibilities. I'd started this story as a victim, a clueless husband fixing windows while his world fell apart. I was ending it as something else entirely, a man who'd learned that sometimes the only way to win is to burn everything down and start over. The last laugh, it turned out, was mine after all.